two engines on the same shop floor. Same make, same model, same four-cylinder design, and one of them is scrap at 140,000 miles, while the other one is still pulling clean oil at 340,000. Same climate, same type of driver. The only meaningful difference in how they were maintained comes down to a $3 part and a 10-minute habit that almost no regular driver has ever heard of. I've been chasing this story through fleet yards and independent shops for months because every time I asked a high-mileage specialist why some engines seem to live forever while others die young, the same answer kept coming back in slightly different words. It's not the oil brand. It's not even the driving style, most of the time. It's the filter. And specifically, it's what the mechanics who see the real-world data actually do with that filter, which is not what your owner's manual tells you to do. So stick with me, because by the end of this, I'm going to show you exactly what the trick is, why the evidence for it is hard to argue with, and how to do it yourself this weekend without messing anything up. No affiliate links, no magic products. Just a part you can buy at any auto parts store in about 10 minutes of your time. Everybody obsesses over the oil. Nobody talks about the thing the oil is trying to push itself through. Walk into any online forum and you'll see hundreds of pages arguing about 0W20 versus 5W30, synthetic versus conventional, which brand has the best additive package, whether the dealership is lying about drain intervals. Meanwhile, the oil filter, the component whose entire job is to protect your engine from the garbage floating in that oil, gets about as much attention as the washer fluid cap. Think about what your oil filter is actually doing. Every minute your engine is running, your oil pump is moving somewhere between 3 and 6 gallons of oil per minute through that little metal can. Every combustion cycle dumps microscopic particles of carbon, unburnt fuel, metal wear shavings, and whatever the air filter didn't catch on the intake side into that oil. The filter is the one thing standing between all that debris and the precision machined surfaces inside your engine. The bearings, the cami, lobes, the cylinder walls that are sealed against your piston rings with clearances measured in microns. And here's the uncomfortable part. Oil filters have a finite capacity. They fill up. And when they fill up before your next scheduled oil change, which happens more often than most people realize, something inside that filter opens up. And we'll get to exactly what that is in a minute. All right, here's what fleet mechanics are quietly doing, and it costs less than a coffee. They swap the oil filter once in the middle of the oil change interval and leave the oil alone. That's it. That's the trick. Halfway between your oil changes, you drop the old filter, screw on a new one, top off the small amount of oil you lost, and drive away. If you change your oil every 10,000 miles, you're swapping just the filter at 5,000. If you do 7,500 mile intervals, you're doing it at around 3,500. The oil itself stays in the engine the whole time. Because modern synthetic oil can genuinely handle those intervals, the filter often cannot. I know what some of you are thinking. A new filter without new oil? That sounds backwards. It sounds like something a scam mechanic would invent to sell you more services. I thought the same thing the first time I heard about it. But once I understood the physics of what's actually happening inside that filter, and once I saw the wear metal data, it stopped sounding weird and started sounding obvious. This isn't a TikTok hack. Fleet maintenance managers at taxi services, delivery operations, and long-haul trucking outfits have been running mid-interval filter swaps for decades, because they're the ones who actually see what 400,000 miles looks like. When your revenue depends on keeping a vehicle running past the point where a normal owner would have already traded it in, you stop following the minimum required maintenance schedule, and you start following what actually works. I talked to the maintenance supervisor at an independent delivery fleet running Ford Transits and Ram ProMasters, vehicles that routinely go over 300,000 miles before getting rotated out. He told me flat out that mid-interval filter swaps were standard procedure across his yard and had been since before he took the job. His predecessor did it. His predecessor's predecessor did it. It wasn't written in any service manual. It was just how experienced fleet people kept engines alive. Aviation does something similar, by the way. Small aircraft engines often get filter inspections and changes far more aggressively than their oil changes for exactly the same reason. The filter is the weak link. Get that right? And the oil will last a lot longer than the sticker on your windshield says it should. To understand why this works, you have to understand what's actually happening inside that little metalkin screwed to the side of your engine. Cut one open, which I'd recommend every car owner do at least once in their lives because it's genuinely eye-opening. And inside you'll find a pleated paper and synthetic fiber element shaped like an accordion folded into a cylinder. The pleats are there to create surface area. A typical passenger car filter has somewhere between 2 and 3 square feet of filter media packed into a can the size of a soda. That media is what captures particles. Good filters, the name brand ones, will catch particles down to around 20 microns with decent efficiency. And the premium synthetic media filters can catch particles as small as 10 or even 5 microns. For reference, a human hair is about 70 microns. The stuff that wears out your bearings is way smaller than that. Now, the media has two problems working against it. First, it has a physical limit to how much debris it can hold before the pleats start to clog up. Second, and this is the one nobody thinks about, as it clogs, the oil has a harder and harder time passing through it. The pressure differential across the filter rises, and that pressure differential is being monitored by a little component that most drivers don't even know exists. Pay attention to this part, because this is the piece of information that changes how you think about oil changes forever. There's a little spring-loaded door inside every oil filter that the manufacturer doesn't want to advertise. And once it opens, your expensive synthetic oil is circulating straight through the engine with nothing stopping the particles. It's called the bypass valve. And it's not a defect. It's actually there to save your engine from a different problem. Because if the filter got totally plugged and oil couldn't pass through at all, you'd starve the bearings of lubrication in seconds and the engine would seize. So the engineers built in an escape hatch. Once the pressure across the filter media gets too high, usually around 8 to 12 psi, depending on the filter, that valve pops open and oil routes around the filter, unfiltered, straight into your bearings, your cam, your turbo if you have one. Here's the part that should bother you. That bypass valve doesn't tell you when it opens. There's no warning light, no sound, no change in how the car drives. You could be driving around for weeks with a bypassed filter, circulating grit directly through your engine, and you would have no idea. Your oil life percentage on the dash would still say 40%. Your oil pressure gauge would still read normal. And quietly, every startup, every highway merge, every cold morning, metal particles would be scouring surfaces that are supposed to be protected. Think about what that actually means. The entire premise of long oil change intervals, those 7,500 and 10,000 mile schedules the manufacturers print in the manual, only works if the filter is still filtering for the entire interval. And in a lot of driving conditions, it isn't. If you've ever seen a Blackstone Laboratories oil analysis report on a fleet vehicle running this method, the numbers are hard to argue with. Blackstone is one of the best-known independent oil analysis labs in North America, and their reports break down wear metals in parts per million. Iron from your cylinder walls and cam lobes, aluminum from your pistons and bearings, chromium from your rings, silicon from dirt that got past your air filter. Fleet operators who run mid-interval filter swaps consistently show lower wear metal numbers than identical vehicles on the manufacturer's standard schedule. We're not talking huge, dramatic differences on every single sample, but we're talking real, measurable, repeated reductions in iron and aluminum over time. And over hundreds of thousands of miles, those small reductions compound into engines that just don't die when they're supposed to. There's also the visual evidence, which I'd encourage anybody to do themselves. Next time you change your oil, don't throw the old filter away. Take a cheap oil filter cutter, about $15 online, and slice it open. Pull out the element. Look at the pleats. On a filter that's been on a high-mileage direct injection engine for a full 10,000-mile interval, what you'll often see is darkening that goes well past dark. You'll see pleats that are completely packed with black sludge in places, sometimes with visible metal glitter if you shine a light on them, in areas where the media has started to collapse under pressure. Now compare that to a filter that came off the same type of engine at 5,000 miles. The difference is immediate and obvious. The halfway mark filter still has plenty of capacity left. The full interval filter is often, by any reasonable definition, done. That's not hidden information. Anybody can do this experiment themselves in their own driveway. And once you do it once, you stop trusting the factory interval the way you used to. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the obvious question is, if this is so effective, why isn't it printed on page 47 of your owner's manual? Why aren't dealerships recommending it? To be fair to the manufacturers, their reasoning isn't purely evil, and I want to give them a fair shake before I contradict them. Service intervals have to be simple enough that 99% of drivers will actually follow them. The moment you start telling people to do two different things at two different mileages, you're going to lose a chunk of your customer base who just won't bother. The manufacturer is optimizing for the average driver finishing the warranty period without a catastrophic failure. Not for the enthusiast or the fleet operator trying to hit 400,000 miles. There's also the matter of consistency. If the factory interval says filter and oil together at 10,000 miles, they can certify that against emissions testing, warranty claims, and dealer service pricing in a predictable way. Adding a mid-interval step makes everything messier on the business side. And the dealerships themselves? Look, they're running a service bay. Mid-interval filter swaps take 10 minutes and generate almost no revenue. Full oil changes generate significantly more. There's no financial incentive for them to suggest you only replace a $3 part when they could sell you a full service. None of that means the manufacturer is wrong exactly. It means the factory interval is a compromise, one that works okay. for most drivers in most conditions, but leaves real engine life performance on the table for anybody willing to spend an extra 10 minutes twice a year. All right, let's get into exactly how this is done, because if you're going to try it, you need to do it right or you'll make things worse instead of better. First, buy the right filter. This is not the time to save another dollar by grabbing the store brand. Stick with the major names: Mobil 1, Wix, Framultra, Bosch, K&N, or the OEM filter for your vehicle. The premium synthetic media filters are the ones worth buying here because they have higher capacity and better efficiency. Expect to pay between $5 and $15 depending on your vehicle, not $3 if you want the good stuff. That was a rhetorical number to make a point, but the principle holds. It's still a negligible expense compared to what you're protecting. Second, do the swap at roughly the halfway point of your oil change interval. If your car calls for 10,000 mile intervals, do it at 5,000. If you're on a 7,500 schedule, do it around 3,500 miler to 4,000. You don't need to be precise. The filter doesn't know what mileage it's at. You're just aiming for roughly the middle. Third, here's the actual procedure. Warm the engine up briefly so the oil flows easily, then shut it off and let it sit for 5 minutes so oil drains back into the pan. Position a drip pan under the filter. Unscrew the old filter. It'll have maybe half a cup of oil trapped in it that'll spill, so we'll be ready for that. Wipe the mounting surface clean. Take the new filter, put a thin film of fresh oil on the rubber gasket with your finger and thread it on by hand. Tighten it the amount the new filter's instructions specify, usually 3/4 of a turn after the gasket makes contact. Do not use a wrench to crank it tight. Over-tightening will distort the gasket and cause leaks. Fourth, top off the oil. You'll lose somewhere between half a quart and a full quart, depending on your filter size and orientation. Check your dipstick, add what you need to bring it back to the full mark. And that's it. Start the engine, let it run for 30 seconds, check underneath for leaks. Done. What not to do: don't overfill the oil thinking more is better. Don't use a cheap economy filter because it's just for half the interval. Don't skip the step of priming the gasket with oil. Don't try to reuse the old filter. And don't do this if your vehicle is under warranty and the dealership is funny about service records. Keep a log of the filter swap with the part number and date, because documenting extra maintenance has never caused a warranty problem, but undocumented deviation from the schedule has. This isn't equally valuable for everybody, so let me tell you where it actually moves the needle and where it's probably overkill. If you drive a modern turbocharged engine, especially one with direct injection, this is probably the single highest impact thing you can do for long-term engine life. Turbo engines run hotter, generate more soot, and are brutally hard on oil and filters. Mid-interval filter swaps on a GDI turbo are not paranoid. They're reasonable maintenance. If you drive in severe conditions, stop-and-go city traffic, short trips where the engine doesn't fully warm up, dusty environments, towing, mountain driving, you're accelerating filter loading significantly compared to the highway cruise conditions the factory interval assumes. Mid-interval swaps make sense. If you're past 100,000 miles on any engine and trying to get to 300,000, this is one of the cheapest insurance policies you'll ever buy. The older the engine, the more benefit you're getting from cleaner oil circulation. On the other hand, if you're driving a naturally aspirated sedan, mostly highway miles, in a moderate climate, and you already change your oil, at or before the shorter end of the manufacturer's interval, you're probably fine. The factory schedule will do the job. You're not leaving meaningful engine life on the table, so before you shut this off, check your last oil change receipt and do the math. How many miles are on your current filter right now? If you're more than halfway to your next change, consider picking up a filter this week and doing the swap. 10 minutes, less than the cost of a takeout meal. And if it gives you another 100,000 miles of engine life, that's probably the best return on investment in your entire vehicle maintenance history. Drop a comment with your vehicle and your mileage and let me know if you're going to try this. I read everyone. And hit subscribe, because the next video is going to be a cut open teardown of filters from 3 different engines at 3 different intervals. And I think some of you are going to be genuinely shocked at what comes out.